we good to go? We're recording? Okay, excellent. Maybe someone else started the recording.
Get one from Metro.
Okay, excellent. Welcome. Hi, everyone. Member check-in. Did you do kind of a quick attendance check? Do we want to call down a list, or? I don't know who's got the list in front of them.
We have quorum, that I can tell you.
Okay.
And then we've got the recording, so I think we're good.
Okay, perfect. Okay, excellent. So I did want to let some folks know that we got some good feedback and had a great conversation as the executive committee around our land acknowledgement, and some feedback on maybe an update from the county staff at a future meeting, which we're going to plan to do, on some of the work that we're doing to try to bring more voices to the table, make sure that we're representing folks, kind of equitably bringing those conversations to the table. The land acknowledgement is one thing, but we want to make sure it's more than just that. So we appreciate the staff for bringing some of that conversation to the table, just so folks who are maybe new to the conversation know how some of that work is being lived out and not just sort of acknowledged at the beginning of our meeting. So I appreciate the PHB members who brought that to our attention. And yeah, so we'll hear an update on that next meeting. I remember we just talked about it earlier this week. So in lieu of the land acknowledgement this week, that's what we wanted to let folks know. All right, public comment. Do we have anyone? Oh, we do. Great.
Good afternoon. My name is Hillary Moran, and I am a program service coordinator with Lane County Health and Human Services Administration. Our contracts team will be reviewing several new and ongoing projects this spring and summer, and they are projects that receive both state and or federal funding. We're looking for board members like yourselves or community members with lived experience navigating homelessness and accessing community resources to assist in scoring these selection agencies to do this important work. Scoring committee commitments can vary from a few hours depending on how many people and proposals we receive, and then participating in a virtual committee meeting to make recommendations to county staff. If you have participated in the past and have some availability this spring and summer, we have a lot of things happening already that we're trying to get on the books, and really just want to involve as much of the community as we possibly can. This is important work, and Lane County is always looking for ways to include our community in the process. So I will leave my contact information with Diana, and then we will go from there and then send interested parties a cognito form in the coming days and weeks. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Is there anyone on Zoom here for public comment? Okay. Any other public comment from the audience? All right, excellent. So next on the agenda is approving the consent agenda. So we have 3 items there, and I don't know, Kate, if you wanted to talk on the first item.
Yes, thank you. So I'd like to recognize a new person sitting at our table. Her name is Maggie Bagan. Bagan, thank you. And Maggie applied for the Poverty and Homelessness Board philanthropic seat. And Maggie and I, yes. Okay. Well, I'll let you keep working on that. Maggie and I had a great conversation a few weeks ago, and as the only applicant for the seat, and it being open actually twice, so it was 90 days initially and then another 90 days, it felt appropriate, particularly recognizing the strong background that Maggie brings, to move her forward to this board. I thought it might be appropriate to give Maggie a few minutes to introduce herself and her background. And so Maggie, thank you for being here. We appreciate you coming in from Florence today. And if you don't mind sharing a bit more about yourself.
I don't think I need a mic, really. I speak pretty loud.
I beg your pardon, Maggie, the folks upstairs,
Oh.
this is being televised live.
Okay.
There you go.
So I bring a wide variety of experience. My interest in poverty and homelessness started when I was a single mom living on welfare. I was lucky enough to be able to go to college, obtain my degree in social work, and get a pretty decent income. However, a lot of people didn't. And so when they began welfare reform, where people on welfare were no longer allowed to go to college and get a degree, I became active with a nationwide program called Welfare Made a Difference. And we went to Washington, D.C. volunteering. I would take my vacation days to go to D.C. and advocate for low-income families on welfare, trying to explain that one of the ways out of poverty and into stability is to have education and training to be able to provide for their family. After that, I served 2 terms on the State of Oregon Family Service Review Commission, which kind of oversees Medicaid, the SNAP program, and the welfare program. And for my paid job, I worked for Coos County Mental Health for 5 years. Then I worked for the State of Oregon Child Welfare Program. Currently, I'm active in Florence. I'm chair of the Public Arts Committee, and I'm on our newly formed Florence area regional housing team or something, resource team. We're going to try to work with maybe individuals, a percentage of people who are unhoused, and help them like navigate the system. Let's see, I've also volunteered for the cold weather shelter and kind of an all-around rabble-rouser in town.
Philanthropic in your time. Thank you. We really appreciate that.
Thank you, Maggie. And so the opportunity is to vote to have Maggie join the Poverty and Homelessness Board as a part of the overall consent agenda.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the other 2 items are the minutes from the February meeting and the 2023 financial statement, dashboard and financials. So is there a motion on the table?
I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
Excellent. Debbie seconds. Any discussion? Yeah, Trevor?
Chair, quick one, I'll mention that there are 5 voting members who are online at this point in time. I've just took note of that. There's Susan Lopez, Sean Murphy, Mayor Van Gordon, Chris McAllister, and Foster Martinez are all online.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other discussion items?
I'll just take a moment to welcome Maggie. Thank you. I think we're probably about to vote you in, so I'm going to welcome you already. Okay.
Thank you.
Feels like it. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Excellent. That passes. Welcome, Maggie.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And so just to share the process, so now I will share Maggie's application information with the Board of County Commissioners, who will have an opportunity to officially welcome her to this board. So we haven't seen that go in a different direction than just welcoming folks, but we want to make sure that we go through that process.
Excellent. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is an update on the all-in Lane County process, which if you guys have been tracking is our effort and valiant effort at that. Got a lot of public praise, specifically from the governor, for our county's application and plan for how we're going to address unhoused homelessness here through the opportunity that the governor allowed and the legislature allowed with some funding this year. So Kate will let you give that update so folks can know where we're at.
Sure, and I apologize for the technical difficulties. Clearly, they're happening, and folks are working through them. Okay. And so All In continues to move forward. As you may know, we submitted the All In Lane County plan to the state of Oregon on March 10th and received the approval to move forward with the plan within a week's time. Lane County was the only continuum of care that received an approval of their plan the first time. And so that was notable and recognized a few times by the governor, which was very exciting. And enormous kudos to everyone involved with the MAC team in particular. They met weekly for almost a month, which is an enormous time consumption, and appreciate everyone involved there. And so since that plan has been accepted by the state, we have slowly been learning what dollars we will be receiving. And we now know that we're going to be receiving about $3 million to support the prevention piece of the plan. That is $3 million out of the total of $21 million we had requested, and so notably less. However, any dollars are positive. That reduction of dollars led the MAC committee to having a conversation around how do we utilize those dollars in the best way possible. And so initially, we had thought we would provide more traditional prevention assistance, and so that looks like supportive services for households as well as like ongoing rent assistance, sometimes like for a month, but could be up to 6 months. As you can imagine, that can get rather costly. And with that nearly $3 million, the state said to us, we need to serve about 740 households. And that's a little less than $3,000 per household. And so the MAC group started thinking a little broader than traditional prevention and learned more about the approach called diversion. And diversion it's a best practice that's being used across the country. And the focus is on providing just short-term housing problem-solving conversations with households, and then sometimes providing flexible assistance. And so, for example, if you have a household who has been staying with friends or family, and the friends or family say, we need you to leave, and they call an agency, the agency then has an opportunity to kind of ask questions to find out, like, why, what's leading that household you're staying with to ask you to leave, and sometimes it's just because someone with 3 kids is eating a lot of food, and it becomes costly, or because the toilet paper and all those household items are costly, and so diversion assistance is able to provide maybe $300 a month to that household that the caller is living in, if the household who owns the home, for example, is willing to say, yeah, they can stay there for another 6 months. And so it's really about being really flexible with the dollars, and then understanding like what might be an option within the household's like realm of supports and their environment. The housing problem solving approach is often connected to motivational interviewing, which is a rather known technique, especially within the physical and behavioral health world. And so we're excited to be able to do more around that approach, and to work to meet serving that up to 740 households that the outcome has identified. So then we also have learned the funding allocation for all the other pieces of the plan. And so that includes rehousing, emergency shelter, street outreach, and then some dollars for the homeless management information system. And the state has provided $15.5 million for those supports. And also said that they're looking for us to create 230 additional emergency shelter beds, as well as about 200 and almost 50 households being moved from unsheltered houselessness to permanent housing through the rehousing efforts. So with that $15.5 million, those are our two key targets that we need to work toward. And we will, of course, be using those plan action items in order to move forward. What that will look like is in the next month, the county will be releasing requests for proposals for local agencies to respond to, letting us know, what type of program are they interested in receiving dollars for. And there'll be one request for proposal likely for emergency shelter, a second for rehousing, and then a third for street outreach that's housing focused. And then, of course, each of those programs will help us work toward those outcomes. And so we're looking forward to partnering with agencies. The focus is going to be moving quickly, both on the county side and then for the agency sides as well. The state has further kind of delineated within those $15.5 million that about $4 million needs to be spent between now and June 30th in this current fiscal year.
Oh, yes.
And as you can imagine, that only even more greatly, just means we have to move as fast as possible. And then the remaining dollars, a little over 11 million, will be spent in the next fiscal year. So from July 1 through January 31 of 2024. So that will be another kind of just piece of those requests for proposals. The ask really just will be for agencies to do as much as they can, and then also to think just creatively about how, to utilize those dollars kind of in the front end, if at all possible. Mayor?
Yeah. So first of all, I just want to say congratulations, because job well done. And I just have to say that I was with several other mayors meeting with the governor before she made the announcement, but she did turn to me and say, by the way, Lane County did a great job. So really, really, really well done. I just wonder, given that really fast turnaround for those 4 million, the street outreach, would that include services that might be extended to like our safe sleep sites or community supported shelters or anything? I mean, would that be counted in that? Is that possible?
Yeah, great question. And so last time we had a conversation around the difference between alternative shelters and emergency shelters. And part of the efforts with All In is that we can improve upon alternative shelters. And those are shelters that do not meet the formal definition from HUD of emergency shelter. And there will be efforts to, for example, try to put electricity and heating into Conestoga huts in order for them to meet that emergency shelter definition. And All In can do that. And then if it's done so that it meets the emergency shelter threshold, then operation dollars can also be provided through the end of January. So then to the mayor's question of can outreach support alternative shelters, the answer is yes, if we're not turning the alternative shelter into an emergency shelter, if that makes sense. If the alternative shelter is going to remain, then those residing in the alternative shelter remain unhoused by HUD definitions and therefore can be supported through street outreach. Another key definition that we receive from the state that informs our conversation is around RVs. And as we're all well aware, we have safe park programs in the community, and the state has shared that the only way for a safe park program to qualify as emergency shelter is if the nonprofit or the jurisdiction actually owns the RVs or, you know, structures that someone's living in. And so the safe park programs, as we're familiar, wouldn't be able, you know, even to be improved unless we actually bought many RVs to be an emergency shelter. The other question was, can an RV be used as permanent housing? And the response there was yes, if the RV doesn't move. And so maybe there's a pad, a concrete pad that someone's renting, and it can be, you know, month to month rental, then that would be okay. As long as the RV doesn't have to move in the future. So those are important details. The other key definition that's been provided is around the Conestoga huts, which are prominent in our community. The definition of emergency shelter specifies that there must be an adequate hard roof and walls. And so there was questions around whether Conestoga huts meet that definition, and the state has clarified that yes, they do as far as the roof. So that's also helpful for our planning.
Mm-hmm. I'm so interested in this question of the RVs. I'm just wondering, given the number of RVs that currently get towed, that are problematic, that probably need upgrades, if would it be, okay, I'm just thinking out loud, so this is dangerous, right?
It's a good thought.
But would it be conceivable that nonprofits or faith communities that are hosting Conestogas and have hosted St. Vinny's car camping programs, that instead of towing those RVs, they actually could be purchased and provided with, I mean, this is a problem. We've got a lot of derelict RVs, and then it's the only home that people have. So I'm just wondering, is there a pathway here with some of this funding to sort of find a place for some of those RVs or purchase some of those RVs? Or, you know, I don't know. People can weigh in on whether that's a crazy idea.
I think the government would have to buy them.
I like big ideas. The one thing that then the government would need to do is make sure that it meets all habitability requirements. And with RVs, you know, that can be challenging and costly sometimes.
Would you guys not be able to buy a plot of land and develop it so it could be an RV park that they can then just rent out those spots? You can move them there manually.
So yes, it can, and you know, part of what, at least at the county, we're cognizant of is that the all-in dollars end the end of January, and so we want to be thoughtful in what new infrastructure we create and new programs versus how we can build upon what we have today. And so with that in mind, improving upon the alternative shelters is a positive step because it then, you know, doesn't create something new and also improves just the overall experience for those who are currently in the alternative shelters. So that will be, you know, one of the primary focuses for the emergency shelter dollars, as well as there will be some new opportunities that come up. I have no doubt. It just won't be the most prominent approach.
And I would just jump in. I mean, one of the safe sleep sites is essentially an RV park at 310 Garfield. So, I mean, that's a model that could be replicated. And conceivably qualify for this, but you got to have the land and the money. I mean, it's not a small thing.
So I guess one thing I want to address, because I think that there's going to be a disconnect from the public perception and even the stated goals from the governor as far as rehousing or housing unhoused individuals, is updating current alternative shelters we're not actually, obviously it is helping that individual to have a more sustainable and suitable place to live. But I think the public perception is these dollars are all coming from and putting into new individuals being sheltered. So I think I think we owe it to the public to be really transparent about that. And then the second question I have, and forgive my ignorance on exactly how this works, but what I have heard in the past is that because our community has been innovative in the way that we've sheltered individuals, and a lot of our shelters do fall under this category of alternative shelters, which are not, by HUD's definition, emergency shelter. And so we miss out on opportunities for funding those types of shelters. Is this a situation where by upgrading those alternatives, we down the road open ourselves up to more funding opportunities for those shelters? Does that make sense?
It does, and the short answer is yes.
Okay.
Particularly related to, state funding. I think All In is it's a view of what the state is looking to do into the future. And so, for example, looking to fund emergency shelter that does meet that definition. And so by creating, more emergency shelter beds, it does provide, additional ways of using emergency shelter dollars. And so I predict that the state would look to be funding alternative shelters, less, if at all. And so it's in our best interest to just upgrade the alternative shelters as many as we can.
So regarding Conestoga huts and that very conversation, many of the Conestoga huts don't have any electricity, for instance. So if we were to upgrade them to HUD standards by adding electricity and thereby some heating in there perhaps, Conestogas could then move from alternative to an emergency shelter and be qualified as a count.
So those would be two ways that the Conestoga huts don't currently meet the emergency shelter definition today. There are other pieces. So, for example, there needs to be restrooms and showers on site and access to food. And so ultimately, if it meets the full definition, then yes, correct.
Right on. And another example that I heard you cite was that if there's a pallet shelter, for instance, that doesn't have electricity and does have the other provisions, food and sanitary facilities, just adding electricity potentially could be, we need to turn that into an alternative shelter and thereby qualify.
Yes.
And importantly, Matthew, is the sustainability of it beyond January 1st, just adding things that we can continue into the future. I think that's one of the big elements that we've talked about at the MAC, and Mike Black and Debbie Farr, you're at the MAC also, that is just as provide the shelter until the end of January, and then the funding runs out, and then we go back to where we were. That's not what anybody wants to see. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a question. This is actually for Brittany. What did you mean, Brittany, when you said the public perception around emergency housing versus rehousing?
So I feel like there was sort of this public story told that the governor wants to get individuals who are unhoused into housing, and that there's X number of people that they're trying to, get into some sort of shelter or housing, and that's what these dollars are going to be spent on. And I think obviously that's true, but there's a portion of those folks who were upgrading where they're currently at. So instead of maybe moving 200 people literally off the streets into some sort of shelter, we might be moving 150 people literally off the streets, and then 50 of those people were upgrading their current shelter, which I'm not arguing with that. I just think there's a public perception that all of those dollars are literally moving one person out of the street into a shelter. So I think we just have to be transparent about that's not exactly how the money is being distributed.
And do you think also it's important to educate the public on how important it is for someone to move out of emergency shelter into permanent supportive housing?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, so I totally agree with that. I think that needs to be really clear, and that's an important message that we can pass on.
Yeah.
And I will also share that the governor's focus with these dollars is the importance of moving people from unsheltered houselessness into permanent housing. And that will be the primary focus, particularly of all the rehousing efforts too, is not needing to land in an emergency shelter in order to then transition to permanent housing. And the fact is that there are some people who may choose shelter before permanent housing, and others that may not choose to engage at that moment in time. And so that's why the outreach teams are so important.
I do just want to add this point that you all know, which is if we have 3,000 people who are unsheltered and we're upgrading, and we're moving 200, we are still, over 2,500 people who are living with blue tarps and tents on our streets. And this is a message that I have been carrying with other mayors to the governor, which is, yes, we all believe in, transitional shelter and supportive housing, but we're not going to get there fast enough, and that the state, I'm hoping in her next budget, really does include some money for the load that the city of Eugene is carrying by having all these people on our streets, and that it's not enough to be looking at housing because it doesn't move fast enough. So just have to put that out there because it's my soapbox and it's my relentless comment to the governor.
Yeah, it looks like, is there anybody else online? It looks like maybe Richard had a comment or a question.
I don't know if folks are able to hear us.
So
You can now.
Oh, good, great.
using my audio from my laptop, right? Okay. So I need to make sure I have my volume turned up, which is probably why we can't hear you. Okay, try again, Richard.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, good enough.
All right, good. All right. Well, I missed it due to the technical difficulties, but how much of this money, and by the way, good job, Kate and others who were involved in this, that the governor complimented what you did before releasing the $15.5 million. And as the mayor just pointed out, that's a drop in the bucket compared to what we need. How much of that money is going to be used for, and how many actual permanent housing places will come out of that? I yield.
So the key rehousing outcome is about 260 households would be served. So that's the key number of kind of new permanent housing opportunities that'll be developed, but it'll be developed through our usual market, as well as other creative options. Is my mic on? Maybe there. As well as other creative options. So, shared housing, being able to stay long-term with family and friends. The rehousing programs are going to have to explore all options, recognizing that our usual market is not freely available.
Okay, anybody else on Zoom have a question or comment? Julie says, is that a mix of rapid rehousing and development of new housing units?
So it's solely rehousing. So no development of new units. The greatest focus on new units is one on master leasing, which again is utilizing what's in the market today, but provides opportunities for a nonprofit or a governmental entity to enter into a lease for multiple units with a landlord, and there are agencies that are doing that today, and we know that there'll be technical assistance opportunities for any agencies that might be interested in doing that. One of the challenges with even creating new units is all the dollars have to be spent by January. And we know with just construction costs or rehab costs that's very unlikely to happen. So we have to really focus on kind of short-term interventions.
Do we have 200 units available in the area inventory?
I think it's a great question, and we're going to find out. And again, we have to really look at the creative options. and see, what someone's, environment and social supports might offer. I'm not going to pretend this isn't going to be challenging. I mean, I think we can all agree on that. And what is different about these dollars is there's an opportunity to really right-size the programs where, we hope case managers will have fewer, clients than usual, and there'll be more flexible dollars than usual. And so if a need comes up, we know even sometimes just finding the money to pay for a birth certificate can be tough. The dollars through All In can help with that. And so, we'll all learn together to see what works and what doesn't.
I know one of the concerns that we hear a lot from the service providers is about the administrative costs of some of this. Do we have an idea of like what administrative funding is available within some of these funds? If you're putting out an RFP, is that something that the county sets, or is that legislated through the dollars already?
Sure. It is something that the county sets. At this point, I can say it's at least 10%, which I know is not extraordinary, but we're just looking to see if we can squeeze that a little bit more. The other piece is that, agencies, do look at kind of what flexible opportunities might be helpful, which sometimes ordinarily will fall into admin, whereas with All In, it might be able to fall into just regular program costs instead.
Okay, that's helpful. Susan Lopez says, I believe Springfield passed some rules allowing the development of ADUs a while back. Was there an outcome that could be reported back that could be implemented in other cities?
Well, Susan, that was in response to state law, so all cities had to update their zoning code to allow ADUs, so the city of Eugene also expanded that. But that code, at least in Eugene, is pretty recent, so it's a little soon to have a lot of data about how many units have been added. We'll know more maybe in another year.
Thanks. Terry says, since the timeline is so short, will the county still have the RFP process, or will it be bypassed in order to implement quickly?
So the county will still have the RFP process. We have a number of changes that will be implemented to try to streamline things as quickly as possible. One example being that there'll be multiple kind of program models within each program type RFP. So, for example, the rehousing RFP will include an opportunity for agencies to apply for traditional rapid rehousing, as well as diversion, as well as there's a subsidy for rural communities as well. So agencies kind of choose, but only have to actually apply through one RFP. So we're looking at bringing in as many efficiencies as possible. The bigger piece for us is we also, we're not in a position to just choose who to fund. We want to make sure we do a process that really will help us understand who will be the best stewards of the dollars and be able to move this forward.
Yeah, so Richard mentioned, so the governor's proposed 36,000 permanent housing units, we get none. From what I understand, that's a separate conversation, a separate number proposal. This, we'll likely hear more through the end of this legislative session on how those 36,000 units are being proposed through the various committees she has convening. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So more to come on that different bucket of money, I guess, if that's a way to put it. Okay, it looks like I got all the questions in the queue here. Any other questions, folks in the meeting? Yeah.
Just a quick comment, so cities over 10,000, because Cottage Grove just went over 10,000, so yes. They also, and I haven't been following the legislation, are going to put quotas on cities for housing, which I have mixed feelings about, because You know, there are things out of the controls of cities like interest rates and, you know, other factors that can impact whether development happens or not. But I do think that the intent is wonderful because we do have just a huge housing shortage in our state. And so, you know, I know our city's passed MUPDs. We've, you know, reduced lot size requirements, et cetera, et cetera. And as a result, I think just in 2 years, we had over 200 units built of multifamily, which we hadn't seen since the 80s. So I think there are other things going on too. They're just in a different venue.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. Donna.
So sorry, it's taken me a minute. I just want to say, I'm not quite sure how this fits with the conversation I heard, what Kate had to say about RVs, but I just want to take this opportunity to say that I have seen a big need this year among families with children who are in RVs for safe, legal camp spots. And the other McKinney-Vento liaisons for Eugene and Springfield, for 4J in Springfield, have expressed the same kind of concern with families that they're working with. And I know we used to have that legal program, the legal camping program through First Place Family Center, but that's not happening anymore. And I know there are some constraints around considering RVs emergency shelter in terms of these dollars, but just please keep it part of the discussion when we're looking at all funding sources and options. And I have some very real scenarios that I don't need to go into right now, but current, where families are just really trying to stay safe. Also, I just wanted to mention that I had a conversation with Gabe from Everyone Village a few months ago, and they have these tiny houses that they're really ready to build. They're very much like the pallet shelters, but they're wooden. And he was really looking for partners for, he said, you know, they've got the plans, they're ready to go. They've got deals with the lumber providers. And so I'm not quite sure what opportunity might be there. I don't know his last name, but I bet some of you do. Starts with a P. I can't remember it.
I just call him Pastor Gabe because I can't pronounce his last name.
I know.
He knows that. He knows that.
And those are the cottages of hope that we've been talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Square One similarly. And I assume, Kate, those are the types of additional sheltering opportunities that would be eligible to maybe apply through the RFP process?
Yes, correct.
Okay, great.
And those, right now, you know, we seem to have a number for singles, but none for families with children.
Yeah, thanks, Donna. I appreciate that comment.
That was what I think what the First Congregational Church did a couple of years ago, was build 2 units that would meet the needs for families with children, and they needed a special exemption from the Eugene Code. And so it would be interesting if we had other sites that were prepared to do that. Yeah.
And I'll say on the cottages of hope, they are transportable. And because of one of the local, it's a chain lumberyard, Lowe's, is providing the materials, and they're able to build them for about $3,000 and put on site any place, not just at Everyone Village.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna move us along, put a little bit extra time to that, but it was important. Obviously, this is a pretty monumental program and amount of funding that has come down from the governor and the state legislature, and we're grateful that our county has amazing leadership in you, Kate, who was able to pull together this plan in a matter of like 5 minutes, and that they actually passed it within a week, which was also phenomenal. And again, in case you guys missed it, there was some really incredible kudos from the governor on the county's plan, and kudos to you, Pat, Commissioner Farr as well.
Not me.
There was a lot of work that went into it, and we're grateful for you guys. So thank you.
Thank you.
May I take 20 seconds to say what the governor said specifically? This is about you and patients and the rest of the team. Is that they just hit all the mark, right? The governor said of Lane County, strong partnership, clarity on what was getting funded, clarity on the capacity they needed, who was going to do it, where it was going to be located. I have to say they have a good handle on their existing infrastructure and where they need to go. Direct from Governor Kotek's mouth to my lips.
That's awesome. Good job. Okay, so next up we're gonna hopefully is Vic on or here or?
He should be online.
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent, there you are, thank you. We're gonna hear a little bit about the consultant process that's been, or the consultation process has been happening about the Poverty and Homelessness Board and Human Services Commission charter review and just kind of big picture looking at both of these bodies from Vic Coleman.
Thanks. Am I able to share my screen?
The folks online will see it. I'll turn my computer around. Like.
And for those who are presently here, if you look at page 11, that will give you some of the information that Vic will be sharing.
It's saying I can't share my screen. Someone else is sharing at the moment.
Brandon's going to try to switch.
That did the trick. Thank you.
We see it, Vic.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Let's move a few things out of the way here. All right. Well, thanks for a few minutes, everyone. Just a few slides here, very high level on this particular project. And we're about 2/3 of the way through, at least with our role. We really hope to have some clarity about where this all goes. So let me go right to the project goal so we know like what the it is here. So the project goal is developing clear recommendations for reimagining the future of two interrelated Lane County entities, one being yours and the other being the Human Services Commission. So I'm going to guess most of you are familiar with both of these bodies. There is clear overlap. This is essentially an organizational development issue to sort. So we're been brought on to do a few things to try to get to potential new ideas about these two particular entities. So I'm going to cover what's been done to date pretty quickly and then what's upcoming. So we started with identifying key informants and developed questions and have been deep in interviews, and many of you have been willing and able to talk to our staff, and we've been bringing that information together, collating it, analyzing it. So thank you for those that have brought that information forward in the interview process. We really appreciate it. There are a number of themes that are coming out, and if you've been involved in, work that involves entities, the themes are kind of similar, that folks are asking for greater clarity on the goals, the roles, the functions, what are the metrics for success, and how do our organizing documents for each of these entities align or don't align with those notions of especially roles and functions. So pretty standard organizational development kind of issues. In terms of particular processes that we heard, again, very high level here, and you've got a detailed version, right, in your packet, that there hasn't been strong enough communication between the two groups, that poverty as its own issue has not been prioritized or prioritized enough, that perhaps as a result of some of the confusion / overlap between the two groups, that there's processes that might be slowing down activity work. You also have a dynamic where this particular entity has one pathway to the HSC, and folks felt like that wasn't always either honored or lived up to in a consistent way. There's also a notion of when you have elected officials in the mix, and the HSC is primarily elected officials, that there's sort of inherent tensions with having electeds in the room. The last point to make is more about kind of the work itself, that folks were wondering, why can't we have clear dashboards that's data informed, that's very public facing regarding all the issues that these two groups face, and that COVID was called out as a very positive example of where the government was being very transparent and had those data dashboards available. The last point I'll make in terms of, again, high-level themes that we heard from the interviews is that there's this inherent tension between when you're engaged in human services work, health and human services work, the tension between trying to look at it from a systems perspective versus a more individual perspective. And, you know, it's a both and picture, of course, but sometimes there is tension that, you know, groups get very focused on the individual level work and maybe miss opportunities for the system change work. So we're not here to judge, we're not here to debate. I'm just here to give you a very high level of what we're hearing to date. So where do we go from here? There's a number of activities coming up, including today's conversation with you all. We had a very similar update with the HSC last week. And we're really leaning into coming up with structural options. We have a group between an ad hoc group between the two entities, the HSC and the PHP, that met for the first time and will meet again, hopefully, in the next few weeks. We will be presenting structural options for that group to chew on, to look at, potentially even recommend. But then we want to open that circle and go wider, and we'll likely use a survey instrument to do that and get information and feedback on those structural options from the members of this group, the members of the HSC. Then hopefully in mid-June, we pick a square and figure out what is the best pathway forward. So we're really right on the cusp of moving into the actual recommended ideas and getting the input from all of you and picking a square, hopefully. And then the idea, of course, is to align whatever documents, organizing documents you may need to have that can really support and align with whatever new structure is decided on. So that's our work ahead. There's a lot happening and a lot that's going to go on in the next, 10 weeks or so. So I'm going to stop there, and I don't know how much time you have, if there's time for Q&A, but that's the high level look on the project.
Excellent, thanks, Vic. Is there any questions? I'm trying to pull up the chat here. Any questions from folks on the Zoom? Yeah, Mayor Van Gordon.
Thank you. I guess maybe either a question or a comment. This stuff's always hard, so I appreciate the general conversation. The two things that really just pop out to me are really getting everybody grounded about who does what, and then what are, like, why are we all here? What's our, what's our core deliverable? The question that I have is as somebody who is one of the elected officials. Can we get a look at the early draft of what those options are being proposed? Can that be distributed? I don't know that we need to be on that committee, but if there's an opportunity to give some sort of feedback, as far as what is, if there's a question about what is plausible from, right, that would probably be helpful.
Great. Duly noted. I think that's a great question for the co-chairs of this ad hoc group to take on. We would like to have them look at criteria, and we've drafted some initial criteria, a lens in which to look at the different structural options. So, but I'm hearing from you specifically, you'd like an early look and be able to see essentially all the options before things get too baked. Is that correct?
Yes, because if I, and I don't want to speak for Commissioner Farr or Mayor Venice here, but there might be value in the three of us just chatting for a second to make sure that, I don't know what's there. I'm sure it's all fine, right? But like just to check in before it gets too far down the road about where people's interest is.
Great. Again, duly noted.
Yeah, Catherine asked, do we know who actually has the power or authority to make the decision about what direction we go? It's a great question. I heard it's you, Catherine.
And I think that, part of it is just understanding what path the group might be wanting to take through the survey, because depending on kind of what the change looks like, that also dictates what path to take.
Okay.
Ultimately, it is the county commissioners who would approve the path, especially if there are changes made. However, this body, the PHB, makes recommendations to the HSC, and then the HSC, could, provide their feedback to the county commissioners. And then this board as well is an advisory board of the county commissioners, and so they can also, so it's kind of 2 plus, the feedback from the other bodies to get to the commissioners.
This is why we're doing this work.
Yeah.
That's very confusing.
In Brittany, can I just I think it really does depend. Without having the charter for the HSC ahead of me, right? You've got three entities that all have sort of approving, are participating in the public jurisdictions. And then if the recommendation looks like a third organization that the governments have to enter into, on their own, right? It very well could be whatever the new entity has to go in front of all 3 boards, right? It could get really complicated here.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Then what I'll say about that, and what Kate says is really, by today's standards, absolutely correct. Ultimately, the Board of County Commissioners, 4 of whom don't sit on either one of these boards, have the decision-making on that. That's what we're looking at. Is that the right way that the decision-making is to be made? And the Human Services Commission is an intergovernmental board. The Poverty and Homelessness Board is multi-jurisdictional, not intergovernmental. The delicate difference there is that HSC is funded by and reports to 3, the City of Eugene, City of Springfield, and Lane County. Poverty and Homelessness Board is funded by and reports to HSC, to the Board of County Commissioners. And I think that's what Vic and his team are working on, is what makes it most appropriate, so that when Mayor Venice and Mayor Van Gordon go back to their entities, they're not saying, well, this is what the Board of County Commissioners wants. It's not what the Board of County Commissioners wants. It's what each one of us in this group, Cottage Grove, wants, and it's what we all want to move forward with, not just the will of 4 or 5 county commissioners. It's the will of the entire, from top of the Three Sisters all the way to Hasita Head Lighthouse. And that's my dream. That's my dream of what comes out of this.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Farr. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because our city is not a member of the HSC because we're not supporting like Eugene and Springfield are. And I think that Mayor Van Gordon's comments are really appropriate. I mean, you folks represent the citizens in those cities and are the ones ultimately responsible for the dollars. So even though the county commission has the ultimate say, and this group has a lot of feedback, we need to remember who our funders are. And so, and I hate to be blunt like that, but we also have to recognize that, with, House Bill 3115 and the obligations on cities, the dynamics are changing as well, where more and more cities may request to become part of HSC later because they're now having to dedicate dollars that they never used to. So I just want to kind of keep us, with the mindset that the landscape is changing politically and legislatively and judicially. So we need to be careful. I was the one person quoted in here saying I thought things were going well. So apparently I'm the only one. So I find that, kind of interesting in itself. But I'm also an elected official, so I also understand how government works.
Yeah. Can I chime in? So I want to thank you, both of you, for those comments, and Mayor Van Gordon as well, because I think the tension that certainly that I feel as an elected official sitting on this board, recognizing that that the issues that we're talking on this board are front and center for the city of Eugene, and so I'm very grateful to be at the table. At the same time, this board is advisory to the county, so it's not advisory to the city council. So whereas the HSC, I have 2 city councilors sitting on the HSC, and they're voting on those funding decisions. So it's a very direct relationship. So it's always a little hard for me to understand what is my best role in the context of this board, given that. And so I'm grateful. I'm looking forward to your recommendations, eager to see what that looks like, because I think it's we all have to be careful about where are we spending our time and where are we giving our insights, and what's the overall benefit of that engagement. So thank you for the work.
And to play the role that I find myself playing a lot, the general public doesn't know or understand any of that, which I think makes all of this even more complicated, right? And making sure that whatever it is comes out, like, has a very clear sort of, picture to tell the public, so they know, who do we talk to about this issue that we have with X, Y, and Z thing. So.
And Chair, to further complicate things, this board is actually the continuum of care agency as well as the community action agency, which are statutory. It requires both of those. So who do they report to?
Right.
Well, it kind of is a gray area, really. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for the question, Catherine. So the answer is, it depends on what the recommendation is, I think is what I heard. Excellent.
But I would say there's 2 levels, I think, in all those answers, which is there's like a jurisdictional approval level, and then there's, the more operational level, like the funders, as well as all those various charters and organizing documents. So there's, depending on the solution or the square picked, right, there will be very specific documents that are going to have to get looked at, but it starts obviously with sort of the jurisdictional part of it. So again, complicated, but not impossible. And there's great motivation on the part of folks to get to a more functional place. I'm really feeling that from everyone. So you all need to hear that there's really high interest in getting to a stronger and more functional place to do the important work.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we are about 15 minutes behind on the agenda, so I'm going to shave a little bit of time off all the rest of things on here in hopes that we can get to the end of it. So we're going to go ahead and do committee updates. If you guys can stay as concise as possible, we can maybe save a little time in this section. So Catherine, I'm going to have you start with the Coordinated Entry Stakeholder Committee.
I'll actually hold because it's folded into the next agenda item.
Excellent, thanks. Dr. Foster with Healthcare. Is he on? He might not be.
It was 20 minutes ago.
I don't see him on the Zoom anymore. Is there anybody else on that committee that had an update?
I'm on the committee, but I don't have my notes, so I don't feel confident giving the update.
Okay. Danielle, did you have something you were going to add?
Sure, I can share a quick update of staff. Just wanted to share that the Health Committee held a retreat last month in March and really focused on how we build our kind of a continuum of medical respite. And the committee came up with recommendations on different models. And I'm happy to share that later.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, I don't think I see Julie on here, but I thought maybe, Richard, you had an update for the League Committee?
I do. I'll be very quick. Just a couple of things I'll touch on. We're looking to reestablish and hopefully get some kind of momentum going behind a homeless Bill of Rights, but on a local level. On a state level, it seems to be a hell of a thing to accomplish. So we're trying to see if we can do it on a local level, either city or county-wide. So we're looking into redoing that kind of thing. We also looked into, in the past meeting, the towing of vehicles, because people are suspected by law enforcement or other people who decide to call in. They are just suspected of camping in the vehicles. So that can be cars or RVs, and without any real probable cause, these are, therefore, they're towed away, and somebody has to go to great lengths that is either on the verge of being unhoused or is unhoused to get them back. So those are just a couple of things that we looked at, and I would go into more detail, but we're pressed for time, so I yield.
Thank you, Richard, for that update. Susan.
Yeah, really quick, Youth Homeless Solutions Work Group. We are into year one. We are looking at data points that we're going to be tracking for year one from the YSDP grant and shifting our focus to our goal sets that we identified for year two.
Excellent, thank you. Matthias, did you have?
Yeah, we're just updating our governance structure for the Youth Executive Committee. We're looking to change our name so it's more youth-friendly, maybe attract some more people, and finally looking to be in person. So we're just trying to plan that out.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, great job, team. We powered through that. Okay, so Catherine, you are up for an update on the coordinated entry webpage and diversion.
Okay, go ahead. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay, I'm playing me/James today since he wasn't able to make the meeting. So the couple things I wanted to share, if I can do a screen share, whoever's sharing can, thank you. So we have, I guess it's maybe not brand new anymore. I think it, in February was when the site went live, but we now have a coordinated entry specific website. The URL is lanecounty.org/housing-help. So we tried to make it easy to remember. And the site is pretty simple in terms of what's on it. It really is intended to be sort of a place that folks can go. And then it shows them kind of the three different ways that they can get connected. So they can either call 211, and then it shows in here, you know, sort of the menu options to get to directly to the coordinated entry team. They can enter their information through this web form that is tied into the Connect Oregon platform, but still goes directly to that 211 team that's also answering the phones, and that team will follow up with folks. And then we have this list of in-person locations that folks can go to. I'm trying to manage all the windows. There we go. And so when folks click, you know, when you're looking at it, you can kind of see hours, contact information, if they serve a specific population, that kind of thing. So all of this, you know, is still sort of work in progress in terms of we're really taking like a continuous improvement approach. We're starting somewhere and then recognizing that we'll have to make changes from there. So this is that landing page. And then we do have a little more information just sort of for either community or folks who are maybe seeking help, you know, that just talks about like, this is what coordinated entry is. And this is sort of, you know, what the system looks like, which kind of allows me to go into the other piece. So there was kind of a twofold purpose in launching this website and bringing the 211 team on. So it is both providing, you know, sort of this one central place where folks can get connected, and it's adding in this layer of diversion / problem solving / rapid resolution sort of service, which is not something that we've had kind of really in a systematic way. So what we're doing in that is that as someone gets connected to that 211 team and they sort of have that conversation with them, they might identify, you know, that this person needs, you know, I feel like the most common one is like a bus ticket, right? To go stay with family somewhere. But it's really flexible funds that are really intended to be able to help meet kind of the needs that person has to be able to get back into housing. So we're adding this piece And then if that's not successful, then they're, kind of given information and connected to get that front door assessment. In the previous version of our system, there wasn't that middle step that existed. It was just like, if you were homeless, your option was to get a front door assessment, and you may or may not ever come up on that list for available resources. So we've added resource into the system and kind of slowly working our way towards the phased assessment approach, which is, kind of this idea. I think of it as sort of off-ramps at different points in the process for folks, depending on their needs and where they're at and what kind of level of support that they are looking for. Let's see. And then we've also got kind of an FAQ page on here that just sort of has some of, these key frequently asked questions that come up. And then James gave me some numbers to share, just kind of about what this team has done so far. So the sort of phone option into 211 started in October, I think kind of late October. Since then, 92 households, which is 133 individuals, have been assisted with diversion funds, so sort of successfully connected to some kind of resource to get them back into housing. The average amount spent per household was about $1,800. And he said, for kind of a contrast, he shared that in that same period, only 70 households were referred to housing from the centralized wait list, and obviously the cost for that is much higher. So kind of thinking about how does this added diversion resource really help us serve even a population that, doesn't even need sort of that rapid rehousing or permanent supported housing level of support. They need some help, but that isn't even necessarily appropriate. And so again, it's kind of helping us get them into that off-ramp and out of homelessness rather than them, kind of being in that position and then staying there and kind of getting stuck in that cycle moving forward. So that's kind of what's been happening and where we're at. It's really, really exciting. I think it's really exciting, and happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Excellent. Looks like there's one in the chat. Are there any resources on the entry specific for individuals with intellectual developmental disabilities?
I'm not gonna Google it while I'm talking. I will find, so Mainstream Housing actually received funds to have housing navigators specifically to support folks. So not just like into their, I think it's Emerald Options housing program, but just folks getting into any kind of housing placement. And so we're kind of trying to help bridge some of those connections too, so that if folks are working with that population, they know that that resource is available. So I'll figure out, I'll go poke around after I'm done talking and put that information in the chat.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Catherine. We appreciate your update.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, now we're going to shift, and I believe, Tim and Marie are here, to have a little bit of an update about the severe weather sheltering work that happened and is never ending because we will have winter until the next winter. That's how I feel right now.
Hello, everyone. So I'll just say a few words, and I know Tim's got a big update. But I just wanted to make sure to touch on just a few efforts that we had this season. So a few things. So the coordinated, severe weather coordinated group worked to really look at and address gaps that could be filled with existing resources, recognizing that there's a limited amount of funding. And so it was pretty exciting to work with that group for a few months and just go through, lists of resources and ensure that there was information out there and it was clear what resources are available in the community. We also had a survival stockpile, which was really exciting because a lot of different groups were able to access those resources. So the First Christian Church, I want to give them a thank you. They're not here, but it was great that they hosted that and helped to coordinate that. Multiple providers accessed those resources, and they did keep a list. I'm hoping to compile that data at some point and share that in the future. And then I just wanted to also point out that there was a sort of a first meeting of all of the warming shelter providers across the county. So including, I know Mike was there, Tim was there. We had folks from Veneta and Oak Ridge and Florence all come together and discuss kind of strengths and weaknesses and where organizations can help each other and learn from each other. So I just wanted to point those few things out before Tim tells us about Eugene and Springfield.
Great, thanks. Tim Black from St. Vincent de Paul. I'll be brief as I can here. I know that you've probably heard and seen the numbers. Egan was open 31 nights this year. The previous record was 25. And we did it. Thank you, volunteers. And in some ways, you know, it was paced in a way that we had just a couple stretches of 4 nights in a row, which is difficult. But we always had a little bit of a break between. But what that means is it was a winter of it being close, always. There were so many nights that it was dangerous and wet and just horrible out there. We were only open 31 of those, which is great. But it's just, I don't have to tell you, a real need to be able to provide something like that every night for people who need it, because they certainly do need it. We had 7 sites we used. Thank you again to Lane Event Center for being there when we needed a larger space, and to our other sites that helped out, including the Mission and the churches. City of Springfield, thank you, Mayor Van Gordon, and I'm glad that Springfield has identified some money to maybe help with the site next year, because I don't think we're going to have the memorial building, and we'll be back looking for downtown again. We also are challenged in downtown Eugene. Our friends at First Christian Church stepped up and offered a street-level chapel room, which let us do a non-sleep all-night room. But it was 31 nights, and they didn't know what they were signing up for when they did that. And it's a real challenge, mostly because of people congregating there in the morning and the next day. And they had so many neighborhood complaints, and it's difficult. So I don't think they want to do that again. They'll continue to work with us to be a transportation hub. But that means, once again, we won't have a downtown Eugene site. So we'll keep working on that. Before COVID, with all of our little sites, it took us about 300 and some volunteers each night. This year, we did it with about 160 to 180 volunteers a night. That's still a lot of volunteers, and it was a great challenge. It has been harder and harder to find people for overnight shifts. And, you know, the county has been wonderful in supporting Egan and the community, and all of you support Egan. But it's getting harder and more expensive because we had to use staff from other St. Vinny's programs for those overnight shifts. Almost every night we're open. People who were already scheduled to work at dawn to dawn or safe sleep sites, they pulled them over to let us use them to make sure that we could open those sites safely those nights in the middle of the night. We couldn't have done it without that. I want to talk about, I was talking about partners in the county, Maria, of course. Alexander LeVake kept me with as much Narcan as I needed. We needed a lot of Narcan. I think you all know it's the nasal spray version of naloxone, the anti-opioid. We had a number of cases where our volunteers had to use Narcan this year. And there was a particularly bad week that all of our programs needed it and other programs across town. It works. It saved many lives. And thank you, Alexander and the county, for always making sure we had enough of that. And then, of course, patients. When we really were struggling near the end of the season, everybody was worn out. Patients would activate her networks to get some additional help from folks from the state. So it took everybody jumping in together. And, you know, I also want to acknowledge our friends who aren't in Eugene and Springfield. You know, we have this big Egan machine enterprise with, you know, St. Vincent de Paul under it. But what they were able to do in Cottage Grove and in Florence and in Oak Ridge, just for sheer will of a few volunteers, is just amazing. So I want to acknowledge the folks from those small communities, what they did. And, you know, I am going to be brief, and I'll stop there. Other than to say, you know, I've talked to a lot of media, but there was a student from the the magazine at the U of O, who is writing a big, huge story on Egan. And he was there the whole season, ended up volunteering, and he kept coming back. Then he had more questions because he was there and he saw it, and he sat down with me just this week to sort of have his final interview. And it's like, what is it about the volunteers? Who are these people that do this? And, I think it's the same thing that you're all talking about here, the confusion between boards and commissions and funding and who does that. It is so simple and so tangible what we do. And the community gets that. Our volunteers get it. You show up, there's somebody right in front of you that you can see, hear, smell, feed, give them a bowl of soup, and they're alive in the next morning. It's that simple, nothing else. And the volunteers feel that, and the community knows that. And they love that there are people in our community. I love that there are people in our community out there doing that. So we'll keep doing it as best we can year to year. 31 is the record, but records are always made to be broken, so we'll see what happens next year. Just the last 5 years that I've been involved, starting in 2018-19, we were open 22 nights, then 14 nights, then 9 nights, then 13 nights last year, then 31. So it's hard to plan around that, other than to be ready to go when we're called upon, and our volunteers are. So, thanks.
Thank you so much, Tim and Maria. Any questions or comments here?
No, I really just want to thank 31 nights is just really overwhelming. And you're right, it could have been 62 nights easily with the number of cold, wet nights we had. And as we think about the state support and we think about what the governor's budget and thinking about what your budget is to do that, I guess I'm wondering, right? Is there a way to rethink this system given what it takes and given the number of nights that we really need to be open? So I guess I'm looking forward to some conversation about how we make this stronger, how we have a shelter system that's open more nights, what it would take. And we all know it's more than we got, but thank you.
Maggie?
I just wanted to mention that the Florence Cold Weather Shelter was open over 80 nights this year.
80 nights.
80.
Yeah, that's incredible. Richard says Operation Winter Stockpile helped quite a lot of folks that he referred there, so that's incredible that we were able to do that as well. Thank you both. Really appreciate it. And it was a long season, and we know that it's like right around the corner, and it's never not planning for severe weather in your all's world. So thank you for what you do. Okay, we have a couple minutes left for Brianna to talk a little bit about the COC evaluation process.
While Brianna's coming down, I do want to put a plug in. The primary funding that's been used for a few years to support severe weather is called Out of the Cold funds, which is from the state. And currently those funds have been removed from the Oregon Housing and Community Services budget at this point. And so if you have an opportunity to advocate out of the cold funding is one source that would be incredibly beneficial to be supported.
Thanks, Kate.
Oh,
Yeah, Brianna, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to first appreciate Amanda, who is not here, for all of the work that she does for the COC, all of the work she does for COC. It's quite eye-opening to see all of this. So, quick update. The COC committee has been meeting for a few months to work on the evaluation for this year for the projects. The evaluation process was released on March 20th, and providers had about a month to submit their projects and their evaluations. That closed on this Monday, April 17th. And we have been collecting all of the information. Based on past feedback from the committee, they wanted to be more involved in the scoring of the evaluations. So we had an opportunity to do that this year with two pieces, one in the diversity and equity section and one in the participant focus. So there's two questions, two narratives within diversity and equity that they were able to score, and then one in participant focus. So they are working diligently to get those scored based on a rubric that we had put together and a scoring guide to systematize that. We meet next week to review those, and then we'll have a meeting for final scores, and then the preliminary scoring will be completed by May 5th, and then any appeals due by May 15th, so a pretty quick turnaround for that. And we anticipate that final scores will be released on May 19th. So pretty quick turnaround all around for that piece. The other update I have is from a colleague, Danielle Bautista. So around the new bonus project. There may be an opportunity upcoming for additional COC funding through the annual notice of funding with bonus and DV bonus. Based on previous funding opportunities, this would allow for permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, and joint transitional housing, and supportive services only coordinated entry. That was a mouthful. The COC Evaluation Committee voted to move forward with permanent supported housing as the new bonus project and to move forward with the new DV bonus project, or with the new DV bonus. And the next step is for Lane County to issue RFPs on behalf of the COC for these new bonus projects so that we can secure a provider and projects in time for the next COC evaluation. I will try to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay, any questions in the chat or in the room? Keep an eye out for that bonus project RFP. Okay. Excellent, thanks for your update. All right, we did it, friends. We made it to the end before 1:30. Reminder, we have our next meeting's May 18th is the executive committee, and then June 15th is the next all-member meeting. If you guys have any questions or concerns, send them to Kate. That's not my job.
Since there's a minute, do you mind if I?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So I wanted to let folks know kind of where the county is around funding for homelessness and anti-poverty programs. As you're well aware, there's been an increase in dollars with ARPA funds and the COVID funds. And so we've fortunately been in a position for the last few years where we weren't looking to make cuts. We were really just growing and building the program's portfolio. And so as we're looking at the next fiscal year and working to understand particularly the state budget, which of course isn't over until the legislative session is over, we are looking at needing to make some small cuts to programs. And so I wanted to just share that so that programs are aware that there may be conversations coming down the pipeline in the next month or so. We're still working to understand what those look like and to move forward with letting agencies know. The biggest change, number one, is what we're not seeing in the Oregon Housing and Community Services budget. I mentioned out of the cold, that's a big one. And unfortunately, that really focuses on the severe weather shelter, the other sheltering types of programs. And so we're working to infill that the best that we can, but we'll not be able to do that at 100%. The other question I often get is, what about all the ARPA dollars? And that's a good question. The reality, though, is that the ARPA dollars, they continue to be spent. And so they are focused on the county level on specific program types. And so where we don't just have like a general bucket of ARPA dollars, we have it like within specific programs. And so, we're not able to kind of just keep spending those until they're gone. They're on specific focus areas. And so again, there's lots of conversations to be had, and I apologize for kind of heightening folks' stress, but I also just want to be upfront. Because if it were me, I would just think we were solid because of all the ARPA dollars. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. And future years, I think, are going to get more difficult. This year, we're just looking at minor cuts again, but we will have conversations in the next month as soon as those are much better understood. And then, of course, they will be finalized once the legislative session ends.
What is the dollar amount of the what did you call it, the out of the cold funding? What do we usually get?
It's right around $1 million.
Great, thank you. All right, any other items for the good of the order? Okay, then we will call this meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Oh my gosh.